Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, but before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and every single click counts. And today we're going to be talking about Baba Lysaga, Night Witch. For 1 colorless, 1 black and 1 green, she's a legendary creature, human warlock, 3/3 with tap, sacrifice up to 3 permanents. If there were 3 or more card types among the sacrifice permanents, each opponent loses 3 life, you gain 3 life, and you draw 3 cards. Now this is a card that has always attracted me a lot, obviously not the witch herself, she is not that attractive, but for the most part I just really like the ability of having to build a deck around multiple card types, because that's the way you get the most value out of this card. You can sacrifice up to 3 permanents, but if you manage to sacrifice permanents with multiple card types, you can get ahead on card advantage with this. And that's basically what our entire deck is going to be built around, just playing cards that either have multiple types or create other tokens that have multiple types so that we can sacrifice them to Baba Lysaga and get some sweet card advantage while draining our opponents. Because of this, our deck is fairly low curve, and it also has a little bit of life gain synergy because we are gaining life fairly consistently with our commander. So anyway, I'm really excited about this one, so without further ado, let's jump in. And we're starting off with Azusa Lost But Seeking. We're going to be sacrificing lands a lot as part of Baba Lysaga's cost, so this is very nice because we'll then draw 3 cards and we can hopefully get ahead on lands by playing a couple of them with Azusa. Braid's Arisen Nightmare is basically like a backup version of Baba Lysaga. We can actually draw a bunch of cards if our opponents don't sacrifice what we sacrifice, and we have a lot of replaceable artifacts and enchantments that we're totally okay with sacrificing. Courser of Krufix is a perfect card in this deck. We want life gain, and this gives us some life gain. It also plays very well with our land theme, which is a big part of the deck, but crucially, it's also an enchantment creature, so if we sacrifice this to Baba Lysaga, that's 2 permanent types down already. Dockside Chef is another good one. It can transform those artifacts we have lying around into cards, and it's also an enchantment creature itself, so it fits the deck perfectly. Elvish Mystic can ramp us into Baba Lysaga on turn 2, which is very strong, and also it can be sacrificed later on as a creature. Foundation Breaker is a card that I think is going to be very good in this deck. We can obviously evoke it, get the trigger, and before it gets sacrificed, we can just sacrifice it to Baba Lysaga, thus meeting the creature part of her conditions. Golgari is nice because we do want life gain synergy, which this provides, but it also creates treasures which can be sacrificed to our commander. Gloom Shrieker works very well by recurring a permanent card from our graveyard when it ETBs, and it's also an enchantment creature, which of course works very well with our commander. Gumdrop Poisoner is a card that I've been trying to find a deck for a while, and it seems very good in this deck because the adventure part provides an artifact, which is obviously great, but then since we're gaining 3 life with our commander, this can consistently come in and just give -3/-3 to a creature, which can often be enough to remove it. Llanowar Elves can ramp out our commander on turn 2. Llanowar Loam Speaker is a pretty interesting one because it can provide ramp early on, which is great, but we can also turn one of our lands into a creature, which means that when we sacrifice it to our commander, it satisfies 2 card types. Marionette Master is one of our finishes of choice. I can't stop singing the praises for this card. It's incredibly powerful, particularly when we have this many artifacts. Mazarek Kraul Death Priest is really strong with our commander because we'll be sacrificing at least 2 permanents every turn, which means a huge repeatable overrun effect, particularly since we go wide quite a bit in this deck. Mere Retriever can provide some nice little recursion, and it's also 2 card types. Mere Sire is 2 card types, and when it ETBs and dies, it provides 2 more cards that have 2 card types. This is amazing in the deck. Ornithopter of Paradise is always pretty good, but since we want cards with multiple card types in this deck, it gets even better than normal. Perennial Behemoth is an important card in the deck. We're going to be sacrificing lands a lot, so this allows us to get them back from the graveyard for more shenanigans. Not only that, but it also has 2 card types on its own. Ramunap Excavator is another way to play those lands from the graveyard, which we definitely want to be doing. Reclamation Sage is just a nice little bit of removal on a creature that we can later sacrifice. Sanctum Weaver can provide a bit of mana in the deck because we do have a few enchantments, but we're playing it because it has 2 card types, which is obviously great. Shriekmaw is similar to Foundation Breaker. This is a powerful one to evoke and then sacrifice. Solemn is obviously a staple in Commander, but in this deck it's even better than usual because we can sacrifice it to Baba Lysaga to get amazing value. Sir Conrad is another of our finishers of choice. This guy is going to be dealing a lot of damage to our opponents once we get our engine online. The Gitrog Monster is an incredibly powerful card, and we're putting lands into graveyards a lot in this deck, so this is going to draw us a lot of cards. Palace Provisioner works really well with all the lands we're going to be playing by giving us artifacts that we can sacrifice. Tireless Tracker is similar to Tireless Provisioner, except it makes clues. Titania Protector of Argoth should be making a lot of 5/3s because we are sacrificing a lot of lands. It also actually brings a land back onto the battlefield when it comes in, which is very nice. Timuret Chosen from Death is really good in this deck. It provides some much needed graveyard hate, but also gives us life gain, which we're interested in, and it also is an enchantment creature, which means it's great to sacrifice. Veinwitch Coven works very nicely, seeing as we're going to be gaining life almost every turn, we get to recur the stuff that we sacrifice with this. Viridian Emissary is great to sacrifice because we get to find a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped when we do so. Witch of the Moors is another great payoff for life gain by allowing us to recur our creatures and making our opponents sacrifice. Yavimaya Elder is another great one to sacrifice because it's going to search for 2 basic lands and put them into hand. And Eudora Gravegardener can provide some great long-term value by recycling our creatures and turning them into lands, which we can then sacrifice. Moving on to artifacts, we have Conduit of Worlds, which is obviously great because we want to be playing lands from our graveyard. Ichor Wellspring is great to sacrifice by giving us some cards. Liquid Metal Coating and Liquid Metal Torque are great, particularly when paired with our enchantment creatures by giving them an extra card type and meaning we only need to sacrifice one thing. Mephitic Draft is another version of Ichor Wellspring, basically. Mycosynth Wellspring is yet another similar card, which instead is going to search for a land. Nimble Right Schematic and Servo Schematic both basically do the same thing by giving us artifact creature tokens that are great to sacrifice. Prize Statue gives us a treasure token when it comes in and leaves. This is obviously a great card to sacrifice as well. Sting the Glinting Dagger works so well with our commander. We're going to get to untap it a bunch of times, and as long as we have stuff to sacrifice, we can deal so much damage and draw so many cards. Thornbite Staff is almost a win con as long as we have a good enough setup, because we can just sacrifice stuff, draw a bunch of cards, untap our commander, sacrifice stuff, draw a bunch of cards, and each time we're draining our opponents for 3. And 1000 Year Elixir can allow us to use our commander's ability immediately and lets us double up by untapping her. Moving on to enchantments, we have Aspect of Mongoose, which is great because it protects our commander, but it can also be sacrificed, and when we do, it gets returned to our hand. Azusa's Many Journeys is really sweet. We get to play an additional land with the first step, then we gain a bit of life, which we also care about, and eventually it turns into an enchantment creature, which is great to sacrifice. Biotransference is a really powerful card. It's going to turn all of our creatures into artifacts, which means they're really good to sacrifice, particularly our enchantment creatures, and it's also going to provide consistent artifact creature tokens to sacrifice. This is great. Druid class gains us life whenever we play a land. That's fantastic. We can also upgrade it to then play additional lands, which we also want, and the final mode turns a land into a creature, which is great to sacrifice. This is just perfect. Hopeless Nightmare is a really good one to sacrifice to our commander because it gives us value when it enters the battlefield and dies. Instill Energy is good on Baba Lysaga. It lets us use her ability immediately, and we also get to untap her once for free. Ordeal of Nylea is a very good card in this deck. Usually you have to wait till the creature has 3 counters on it before sacrificing, but with our commander we can just sacrifice this immediately and go search up 2 lands to put onto the battlefield. Rancor is a great card that pushes through some damage and is also very good to sacrifice to our commander. Moving on to instants, we have Mortality Spear, which should almost always be turned on because we're gaining so much life. Not Dead After All is really good in this deck because we get to save one of our creatures, and it then comes in with a roll enchantment token that is really good to sacrifice. Tragic Slip is also almost always going to be turned on because we're sacrificing creatures so much. And moving on to sorceries, we have Lich Knight's Conquest. I've been trying to look for a deck for this for ages, and it just seems perfect here because we have so many enchantments, artifacts, and tokens that we want to be sacrificing. Life from the Loam is one of my favorite cards in the game, and I'm so excited every time I get to put it into a deck, so I'm really glad that it's going to work well here. And Toxic Deluge should be fairly easy to cast because we're going to be gaining so much life. For Planeswalkers, we have Tivar Jubilant Brawler, which seems like he was made for this deck because he's effectively going to give Baba Lysaga haste. It's also going to untap Baba Lysaga with his +1, which is amazing, and even the -2 can be relevant seeing as our deck is fairly low to the ground. Moving on to lands, we've got Blinkmoth Nexus. This is amazing because when we activate it, it's a creature, an artifact, and a land, which means that it satisfies our commander's ability all on its own. Darksteel Citadel is an artifact land, great to sacrifice. The same also applies to Tree of Tales and Vault of Whispers. Demolition Field is going to allow us to deal with problem lands from our opponents. Dryad Arbor is another creature land, which means that it's very good to sacrifice to our commander. Dunes of the Dead is also great to sacrifice because we get a 2/2 zombie for our trouble. God's Eye is another great one to sacrifice, but instead of a 2/2, we're getting a 1/1. Colony Garden is a land that comes in and makes a token when it enters the battlefield. That's something pretty useful. Mishra's Factory and Mishra's Foundry are great because once activated, they have 3 card types, which makes them perfect to sacrifice for our commander. Mutavault has 2 card types once it's activated, which again makes it very good to sacrifice. Reliquary Tower is going to make sure we don't have to discard all these cards we're going to be drawing. And Restless Cottage makes a food token when it attacks, which is something we're very interested in. So there you have it. That has been my Baba Lysaga Night Witch deck tech. I'm really excited to sleeve this one up and play it. I've got almost all of the cards. Have you played this deck before? What cards do you think I missed, and what cards wouldn't you have added? Let me know in the comments section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.